So hello, everybody. Good to see you here. Good to have you here in our webinar. I hope you had a great morning, afternoon, good night, wherever you're coming from right now. So thank you very much for joining. And I would like to invite you to our webinar regarding the Dams and Reservoirs Day in 2025. We have I would say, a great agenda, and which combines a lot of interesting topics throughout Europe. And I think that's a good possibility to celebrate the Dams and Reservoirs Day. So welcome, everybody. My name is Lara, and I'm part of the Young Professional Board. I'm vice chair since last year, and together with my colleagues and also the European ICOLD network, we are organizing this webinar. So let me quickly go through a small introduction about today's event. So we invited for today's webinar, next to myself and Mattea Kluhn, as part of the organizers from the ICOLD Young Professional Forum, we invited interesting speakers from different fields. So around our agenda, we will have Sera Lazaridou speaking. She is president from the ICOLD European Club, and she will give us an introduction about the Dams and Reservoirs Day and why it was established and why we want to celebrate more and spend more attention on the dams and the reservoirs. We also invited Liza Bensasson. She is vice president from ICOLD, and she will give us insights about the Chengdu Declaration, the World Declaration on the Role of Dams for the Energy Transition and Climate Change Adaptation. We also have some topics regarding what's going on right now in the dams and reservoir sectors in Europe. So we invited Dr. Emanuele Quaranta, and he is a scientific officer in the European Commission in the Joint Research Center. And his presentation will be about the complexities and challenges of the water reservoirs with a focus on the EU policies. We will also have a presentation held by Dr. Christoph Hauer. He's chair of the ETIP Working Group True, which is focusing on works regarding hydropower and biodiversity. And in his presentation, we will learn something about the good practices of the European hydropower industry and to address aquatic biodiversity management and sediment flow. Afterwards, when we close the European topics, Mattea Kluhn, she will give us insights about the work of the young professionals, because for us it is very important to give the opportunity to get to know the network we are offering and that you can also use it. And after all the sessions, we will have a Q&A. So that we will have enough questions to answer all the questions. You can just directly ask to the presentators about their topics, and we can have a great discussion on that. But anyway, if you have questions in between, please use the chat to write it down, that it is saved for later and we can get back to it and answer it. Just notice your cameras are turned off and you're on mute during the presentation time. And then for the Q&A, I guess there will be the chance to also give access to the microphone and talk to you directly. So thank you very much. And I'm really looking forward to the webinar. And now, Sera, I would ask you to start with your presentation and give us an introduction about the European Dams and Reservoirs Day.
Thank you, Lara. Thank you. Good afternoon to everyone. Good morning, good night, depending on when you are attending from. Let me just give me a few seconds so that I can share my screen. Okay. Okay, I hope now you can see my screen. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay, thank you so much. Okay, first of all, I would like to thank you, everyone, and especially the Young Professionals Forum. Thank you, Lara. Thank you, Mateja. It's really an honor to be able to make this presentation today, and it's really a pleasure. And we want to thank you for supporting the celebration of Dams and Reservoirs Day for this second consecutive year. I would also like to, on my behalf, to welcome all the participants and mention that your presence is very important because your involvement supports this newly established institution as we are trying to become more impactful. Initially, I will make a brief overview of the ICOLD European Club. What is the ICOLD European Club? It's 27 ICOLD European national committees. And what is their aim? Their aim is to encourage cooperation. The club's aim is to encourage cooperation and exchange of information among the European countries, especially in issues of significance like dam safety, to create European working groups, to promote the organization of professional events and training opportunities for young professionals, to support dams to decision makers and the public. Today, we have 12 active groups that run within the ICOLD European Club. They mainly aim to interact and collaborate with ICOLD technical committees, but they also organize meetings, workshops, seminars, symposia, and they also focus on emerging issues within Europe. The working groups highlighted with an enhanced circle are those directly related to public awareness actions. There is a long-term long-term action within the club related to public awareness. The most recent action is the one that we are going to analytically present with the following slides, the Dams and Reservoirs Day in Europe. But why establish a celebration day dedicated to dams and reservoirs? Our community has long recognized a critical communication gap when it comes to building societal and policy support for dams. Recognizing the widespread debates with many misconceptions and misinformation surrounding the benefits of dams, as dam professionals, we have a heightened responsibility to clarify these persistent myths. As we face climate change, rising water and energy demands, and increasing environmental pressures, raising public awareness and acceptance of dams is more critical than ever. Educating society on the essential role of dams, as well as the potential consequences of neglecting or dismantling them, is crucial to overcome barriers and sustain this vital infrastructure. Evaluating the impact of other well-established dedicated day events celebrating water, dams, and hydroelectricity. I'm sure that you know many of these. The Dams and Reservoirs Day initiative stands out as a particularly promising action, and it is uniquely focuses on and emphasizes the vital role of dams. Originally, it was proposed by the Italian Commission on Large Dams, and it was embraced by the broader European dam community. These celebrations have strong potential to become widespread and disseminate efficiently with the supporting power of social media. We have a formal declaration. It has been issued to underline our shared objectives, highlighting the main goals of the Dams and Reservoirs Day. You may find this declaration. The document is on our website, along with a high priority to raise public awareness about dams, reservoirs, tailing dams and levees. It also highlights the importance to invest in education and capacity building, cultivating a new generation of professionals with the expertise to manage, maintain, and improve these systems. By engaging youth early on, we ensure continuity and innovation in our field. And this is also why this webinar is very important today, because this way we engage young professionals who are the future of our profession. Dams and Reservoirs Day is providing this opportunity through a wide range of events. These events are celebrated across Europe. If this is possible simultaneously, that means that the events may take place also before or after the official celebration day. Every year, the national committees have to decide which is this official celebration day. For this year, we selected May 28th. The activities carried out across Europe may include technical visits and study tours for professionals and students, excursions for schools and the general public, seminars on dam engineering and safety, cultural and sports events held at dam sites, media and social media campaigns. The national events are organized by the ICOLD European National Committees, and they are all coordinated by EurCOLD, which provides common messaging and dissemination. In general, we divide actions in two main categories, those with physical or virtual participation, like the action that we're having today, this webinar, and social media campaigns. Now, the following slides summarize events during the 2024 and 2025 ongoing celebrations. This is the 2024 logo. The secondary title that was selected by the national committees last year was Reservoirs for Europe. The inaugural celebrations took place on May 29th with enthusiastic participation of 19 European countries. You can see these countries at the bottom of the slide. Activities were implemented in collaboration with dam operators, universities, associations and local partners with the goal of holding events simultaneously across Europe. In 2024, we recorded 19 seminars, webinars and symposia, 34 on-site visits. Many were coupled with presentations, school-focused outreach and public campaigns. In total, we had 58 events, which were held in partnership with 66 organizations. You can see their type on the left side, on the left graph's pie. An estimated 3,440 people physically participated. Of these people, 7% were estimated to be school students, 22% university students, 23% young professionals, 46% senior professionals and members of the general public. These statistics exemplify how strong national commitment can amplify regional success. Social media played a major role in disseminating our message, as the online campaign was supported by many water-related institutions, dam owners, operators, engineering firms, and other stakeholders across Europe. This is the second year. The celebrations are still ongoing, so we don't exactly have statistics yet. But the secondary, I can tell you, initially this is the logo of 2025, the one that we are using now in this webinar. And the secondary title that was selected is Water and Energy Security for Europe. Now we will display some indicative photos from events that we know that have already been implemented by the national committees. The first one is from the Greek Committee on Large Dam with the association and collaboration of the Association of Hydraulic Engineers in Greece. We formed a team, let's say, and we participated in a marathon around the Marathon Dam, which was burned last year in order to raise funds to replant the reservoir surroundings. This is from the Portuguese Committee on Large Dams. They had coupled presentations with site visits. The Italian Committee on Large Dams, of course, they have many, many events. We will see that in the following slides. They also had a very extended communication campaign, which included a press conference on May 9th. This is from the Turkish Committee on Large Dams. They had a student site visit with the university. They went to a new dam that was completed in 2020, a 135-meter, very important dam for Turkey. EurCOLD also, they had a site visit in one of their most important hydroelectric stations. An international conference that were organized by ICOLD, the Albanian Committee on Large Dams. And of course, today's webinar, which is, as I have already mentioned, so much important for us, since it engages young professionals. And of course, we have other committees who are underway and they are also celebrating the events. We have BDS, Norway, CFPR, Switzerland. I cannot mention everyone. We saw that in the previous slides. Now, it is worth mentioning that the Italian Committee on Large Dams, also under the umbrella of the European Dams and Reservoirs Day, organized its 10th Dams and Territories workshop. That was last Friday in Sardinia. This is a very important workshop because what it's doing is that it's promoting collaborative interaction and facilitates constructive dialogue between dam owners, stakeholders, and the public of the host territories. That means that it mainly assesses the proactivity of dam owners in environmental actions to mitigate impacts, in promoting local development, and in transferring resources to the host territory and sharing benefits. The Italian committee also created a dedicated website for the events. This is the second year that they are creating this website. They have, as we can see, they promote more than 38 events with a collaboration of 18 partners. And we can see that they also have an events map and an event list. Now, at the heart of our effort to expand this action, gain greater support from the industry, and reach new audiences lies the EurCOLD Manifesto on Dams and Reservoirs. It was initially issued in 2016 and reissued this May. The manifesto embodies our commitment to the sustainable, transparent, and responsible management of water resources in Europe. It is constructed to present in a simplified and documented manner the strategic role of dams in meeting rising demands for potable water, irrigation, energy and fire protection, raising environmental awareness, adapting to climate extremes, floods and droughts, supporting the energy transition through hydropower, aligning with European policy frameworks, as we will see later from Emanuele as well, and finally promoting sustainable societies and call for a smarter governance framework. The manifesto aligns with the recently released Chengdu ICOLD World Declaration, which will be shortly presented by ICOLD Vice President Liza Bensasson. Conveying messages on social media is more effective when they are short, targeted, and provide statistics and values. This is the approach we use different aspects of the manifesto. We try to highlight also its graphical layout. You may access the document on our website or by using this QR code. Now, some information about the online campaign and in general the annual promotion that we are having of our actions. Currently, our LinkedIn page has more than 1,400 followers. There is a mix of young professionals and seniors from 44 countries worldwide, mainly from Europe, but also from Asia Pacific, the Americas, Africa. You can see that on the right side pie. They are significantly engaging with our posts, especially during the Dams and Reservoirs celebration period. We can see that on the left side graph. The engagement rate ranges annually between 18 and 20%. This is considered to be very high percentage. The online campaigns during the Dam and Reservoirs Day celebrations have been supported and promoted by ICOLD, hydropower organizations, dam owners and operators, engineering and consulting companies across Europe. And it is also worth mentioning that some national committees like FinCold and the Turkish Committee on Large Dams launched their LinkedIn pages as part of their Dams and Reservoirs Day actions, expanding the online ICOLD network on a European level. You may find information on our activities, which are uploaded on our website is being maintained and supported by the Portuguese Committee on Large Dams. And from now on, we are also having support from the Swedish Committee on Large Dams for the annual newsletter and the LinkedIn page. And of course, we warmly want to invite you all to support and participate in this important initiative, helping to establish Dams and Reservoirs Day as a widely recognized and respected European institution. Unity and collaboration will be the foundation of our continued success. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Sera. I think, in my opinion, it's a really good initiative that was taken to inaugurate the Dams and Reservoirs Day, because when I ask my friends, like non-engineering friends, and I ask them, hey, do you know where our water is coming from? They're like, yeah, from the tap. Same happens usually when I ask some of my friends, like, do you know where our electricity is coming from? Sure, from the plug. I mean, at least in my my point of view, it is so important to put awareness on all those topics, the infrastructure, which are dams and also reservoirs are belonging to. So thanks for giving us an introduction.
Thank you.
That was really good. And now I would put the focus on Liza and would kindly ask you to share your presentation on the Chengdu Declaration. Yes, perfect.
Yes.
The stage is yours.
Okay. So, congratulations to the European Club for their very extended celebration for the European Dams and Reservoirs Day. And I'm very happy to join this celebration with this presentation on the Chengdu Declaration for Dams and Reservoirs for Energy Transition and Climate Change Adaptation. Thank you to YPF for organizing this webinar and for giving me the opportunity to have this presentation. So the content of this presentation I will go through a very brief history of ICOLD and its mission, the path to the signature of this important Chengdu Declaration. We will focus, of course, on the main messages and the recommendations, and we'll have a look at what's next. So, ICOLD history and mission. The International Commission on Large Dams was founded in 1928. I guess not everybody in the webinar is ICOLD members, so this is why I'm going quickly through this. ICOLD is a non-governmental organization, provides a forum for the exchange of knowledge and experience in dam engineering. And it is organized having members, the national committees. We have 101 member countries who all of them participate in the General Assembly. Also, we have the board, which consists of the president, 6 vice presidents, and the secretary general. This is a picture of the board of the previous board, because now since Chengdu, we have 2 new vice presidents and a new president, but our first board will be next month. And of course, very important bodies of ICOLD, of the organization of ICOLD, are the regional clubs, and which are namely the European Club. You saw how successful and busy and activities through Sera's presentation. The African Club, the INCA, which stands for the Americas Club, and APG, which stands for Asia Pacific Group of ICOLD. The mission statement of ICOLD, and through this I want to note how important this Chengdu Declaration is. In the mission statement, ICOLD states that its aim is to lead the profession by setting standards and guidelines to ensure that dams are built and operated not only safely, but also efficiently, economically, and environmentally sustainable and socially equitable. And this is an important factor of the mission statement, that the environmental considerations are taken into account at all stages of the life cycle of the dams and reservoirs. And we mean to meet the challenges of the 21st century, which are more and more difficult, and in the development and management of the world's water and hydropower resources. And we saw very important documentation and scientific progress is through the bulletins. We saw some in the right. I chose some that are more relevant to today's subject on the environment, on the security, on the sustainability, and practices that need to be applied. This is not the first World Declaration that ICOLD had ventured with. In 1919, we had the World Declaration on Dam Safety, which was preceded by the African Sustainable Development in 2008. And the World Declaration for the Sustainable Development and Water Storage in June 2012. So the initiative for the Declaration on Dams and Reservoirs for Energy Transition and Climate Change Adaptation was launched in Gothenburg in June 2023. That was also the beginning of my mandate as Vice President. And with the support of President Michel Linot, I jumped in the opportunity to join the ad hoc committee and work with the two co-chairs, Devendra Sharma, then Honorary Vice President, now our new President of ICOLD, and Honorary Vice President Enrique Cifres from India and Spain, respectively, and with all the other members of the ad hoc committee from Argentina, Nigeria, China, and Iran. And through many meetings and online meetings and exchange of emails, we happily reached in New Delhi in October 3rd, 2024, where during the ICOLD General Assembly, the World Declaration proposed by the ad hoc committee was unanimously approved. And then through a year of intense work to fine-tune some wording and to communicate with sister international organizations, we reached the signature of the World Declaration in Chengdu on May 21 last month. And this is what the Chengdu Declaration looks like. You can find it in the ICOLD website. And this is what the title looks like, stating the date of the approval. And at the bottom, we can see the co-signing organizations, which is the International Hydropower Association, the International Energy Association, the Hydro Division, ICID, that is the International Committee of Irrigation and Drainage, the World Water Council, and the Institute for the Mediterranean Institute for Water. The Chengdu Declaration consists of the following sections: a changing world, describing what are the today's and challenges and the one we're facing due to climate change, clean energy transition, climate change adaptation demands water storage provided by dams and reservoirs, environmental considerations, which are very important, and concluding with the key recommendations. And that is the structure we're going to look at in the next slides. So first, we're facing population growth. The global population has skyrocketed from 1.5 billion in the early 20th century to nearly 8 billion today, with projections of 10.4 billion by 2100. This population rise directly impacts water demand, which could rise by 20 to 30% by 2050. Also, the current global water demand is 4,600 cubic kilometers per year, with 70% used for irrigation. This means that, with the projection of a population of 9.7 billion by 2050, it means that unless freshwater storage is drastically increased, up to 4.6 billion people will be in water-stressed areas by 2050, and almost 1 over 4 children will be in water-stressed areas. Changes in precipitation patterns, increased evaporation rates, and melting glaciers are expected to exacerbate water scarcity in many regions, more than are facing drought events up to today, and increase the frequency of peaks in extreme precipitation events, which of course directly impact flooding extents and sizes and damages. So uncertainty in spatial and temporal distribution of water resources also demand some water storage. Very sorry. I would like to quote the president of ICID, Marco Arsieri, who gave this statement in view with the signature of this play a role in modern irrigation for providing reliable and consistent water supplies, allowing for storage during wet seasons. Dams and reservoirs ensure stable food production, even in regions with high seasonal rainfall variations, where irrigation is necessary for crop production. I would like to keep the following key message: expanding water storage capacity for securing water and food supplies in a changing climate. Let's look at the role of dams and reservoirs for clean energy transition. Achieving net zero by 2050 requires a massive expansion of renewable energy. Total global electricity generation is expected to rise 2.5 times by 2050. Hydropower, with its ability to provide low-carbon, flexible energy storage, is essential to balancing the grid as more variable renewables like wind and solar come online. No country has achieved a fully renewable grid without hydropower. That is why doubling global hydropower capacity is critical to meeting climate targets. However, we see that progress is held back by financial uncertainty, regulatory complexity, and slow permitting processes. Pump storage is the world's water battery. Pumped storage hydropower, which already provides over 90% of the world's stored energy, is key to grid stability. It allows renewable energy to be stored and dispatched when demand spikes, ensuring a reliable and affordable power supply. Also, it gives the opportunity for off-river closed systems, pumped storage plants that do not depend on hydrology of the site. Moreover, they are versatile in terms of their location, and they can employ existing reservoirs and, of course, existing energy transport infrastructure, and thus minimize environmental impact, reducing GHG emissions for their construction, but also during their operation, as they can synergize and provide hybrid power production plants. This way, they are minimizing also the generation costs and the operation and maintenance costs. Challenges faced include financial uncertainties, regulatory ambiguities, and administrative delays. Clear frameworks and streamlined permitting processes are needed for faster hydropower development. And I'm going again to quote one of the signatories, Eddie Reed, CEO of International Hydropower Association. It is encouraging to see further global recognition of the vital role that sustainable hydropower plays in delivering the clean energy transition. Pumped storage, the world's water battery, is already providing over 90% of the world's stored energy, but we need more. The hydropower sustainability standard gives us a framework to ensure that the hydropower is developed responsibly, delivering clean energy while protecting ecosystems and supporting local communities. And the key message from this section is that hydropower is the backbone of the clean energy transition, enabling a stable, reliable, renewable energy future. And now let's come to the climate change adaptation, which of course demands water storage provided by dams and reservoirs. Dams and reservoirs for flood and drought management, because storage reservoirs help mitigate flood risks and reduce the frequency of inundations. Storage reservoirs provide resilience against droughts through annual and interannual water storage, supporting human uses and maintaining ecosystems. Multi-purpose dam projects through integrated river basin management can provide benefits to the stakeholders of the river basin, with increased storage volume in the reservoirs and effective water and sediment management can ensure a climate resilient supply for all uses, for drinking water, for agriculture, for energy generation, and at the same time cater to environmental needs, with all of this with stakeholders' consideration and balance. And the key message from this section is that increased freshwater storage and integrated river basin management enhances resilience to climate change. Some of the environmental considerations have already been mentioned, but we need to stress that the positive and negative impacts of the reservoirs need to be carefully studied and weighed against each other by all organizations, not only by ICOLD, by the ones that are preparing environmental impact assessment studies, by the ones that are looking at sustainability, by the ones that are producing new guidelines and regulations. carbon footprints and ecological impacts of dams need to be managed, of course. And one very important initiative of ICOLD is the launching since 2023 of the Dams and Sustainability initiative. There are already 2 online webinars available, and there is a lot of progress done with also with workshops, because we need to look on the opportunities that best practices give us to integrate sustainability in all stages of life cycle of the dams and reservoirs. We need to look at habitat loss, disruption of river ecosystems, relocation of communities, and properly address each of them with the stakeholders. But we need also to remember that hydropower has one of the lowest carbon intensity factors of all electric power generation technologies. And thus we see the balance in the picture on the side. And this should be our aim, because greater understanding of dams' impacts and effects of preventive and mitigation measures will enhance their sustainability throughout their life cycle. And this is the goal of ICOLD. In fewer words, because storing water secures the future, because dams are vital for successful energy transition, because adaptation to climate change needs safe and sustainable dams, ICOLD and the supporting organizations are proposing these key recommendations. 1, we need to expand global water storage worldwide, because per capita storage capacity has been steadily declining since the 1980s due to population growth, sedimentation reservoirs, and a decline in dam construction. I know that Emanuele will stress the need to manage demand, but the needs are so high that these both measures should go hand in hand. Expand global water storage and manage demand. We need to accelerate sustainable hydropower development, which will allow us to balance growth and energy transition towards the net zero pathway. We need to unlock hydropower potential in developing regions. In regions where only 10 to 30% of hydroelectric potential has been harnessed, demands significant effort, commitment, and cooperation among the main stakeholders. We need to recognize energy storage as a strategic asset to facilitate effective energy transition and modern water management. We need to establish clear regulatory frameworks that include additional tariffs for energy storage, and this is urgently needed to ensure equity in energy access. Administrative reforms need to streamline permitting and approvals, and it is very positive that the European Union has simplified certain procedures. And then, as said before, we need to highlight the environmental and social benefits and balance them against eventual negative effects, which we'll try to mitigate. Strengthening dam safety throughout the life cycle of dams is an ongoing process that needs to go on along at all times. including, and we need to look at rehabilitation and upgrading, including surveillance, real-time flow forecast and early warning systems to enhance resilience, optimize reservoir management operation, smart regulation, and capacity building in face of extreme events exacerbated by climate change. Effective water and sediment management is essential to preserve the functions of dams and reservoirs, considering techno-economical, environmental, and regulatory constraints. And then, finally, we need to promote research and development into new technologies that facilitate climate change mitigation and adaptation efforts. This includes exploring the implementation of hybrid hydro battery systems, virtual power plants, automated data systems using artificial intelligence, and comprehensive information system architecture. And of course, advanced materials for sustainable dam construction and rehabilitation. I would like to mention that all three awards, innovation awards that were given in Chengdu by ICOLD had such characteristics. This is a small summary of the World Declaration. Dams and reservoirs are fundamental for achieving sustainable development, balancing energy needs and adapting to the growing challenges of climate change. Their role in water supply, flood control, drought mitigation, and low carbon energy generation makes them a key element in global efforts to ensure climate resilience, as well as water, food, and energy security. And what's next? I will pass this. We have multiple technical committees that are looking into aspects of the already discussed in the World Declaration, in sediments, in sustainability, in safety, for floods, for climate change, for the environment, for the integrated river basin management. And what's next? In Chengdu already, after this signature, we met to see how we can disseminate the Chengdu Declaration with the International Hydropower Association, EurCOLD, and ICOLD members. And already there is a lot of publication going on in LinkedIn. We are, of course, we rely on YPF, our young professionals, for this dissemination to pass on the message like we are doing today. We're relying on the national committees and the regional clubs, and of course, our partners. Our target audience are the national, international policymakers and financial institutions. I would say these are the decision makers that can implement the recommendations firsthand. Then there are the scientists and the energy sector stakeholders. And then we have the general public, which we can reach through media, and also the national, the NGOs that sometimes represent some groups of general public. The communication channels will be, of course, digital as well as traditional, and we need and we have some very good stories to narrate and to tell about how this World Declaration is not only words, but is turning into acts. One small example of a good story is Lake Kerkini in Greece, which is also a Natura network site and a Ramsar site. Provides flood protection, sediment control, irrigation, and has a small hydro. And with that, I would like to thank you for passing on the message. Storing water secures the future. Dams and reservoirs empower a resilient world. Adaptation to climate change needs safe and sustainable dams. Thank you all. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Liza. Yeah, I really want to highlight what milestone it is to have signed this World Declaration, because that means that it is really like an international work which was signed here. And I mean, I guess most of us, or hopefully all, we know how important hydropower is, how important the role of dams are in many different functions. So I really hope that the World Declaration, which was signed in Chengdu now, can be like a guidance also for policymakers, for governments, and for all the other parties which are included in the energy transition and in the shaping of the future of dams and reservoirs. So thank you very much for presenting it and giving really meaningful insights into the World Declaration. I think the work was well done.
Thank you, thank you. I only hope the message is passed on and reaches where it needs to reach. Thank you very much.
I think so too. So I would just directly go the bridge and hand over to Dr. Emanuele Quaranta. He's working for the Joint Research Center from the European Commission. So he is on the site or close to those people who give guidance, who do regulative work. So I want to give the word to you, Emanuele. Please share your presentation with us.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I'm sharing. Yeah. Can you see my presentation?
Yes, we do. It works.
Okay, perfect. Okay, thank you very much for inviting me to this webinar. It's a pleasure for me to collaborate with you, with ICOLD in general. I am Emanuele Quaranta. I work at the Joint Research Center of the European Commission. My expertise is mainly in the water energy ecosystem nexus, with focus on hydropower, dams and reservoirs, but also on other topics, for example, wastewater, nature-based solution. Just a few words about what is the JRC, the Joint Research Center. The Joint Research Center is a Director General of the European Commission, where we are a part of the European Commission. Our scope is to provide scientific evidence, scientific background, and to support the policy-making process by managing also scientific knowledge and technical expertise. In particular, I am in the Ocean and Water Unit, where we work with an holistic and integrated approach to all the water sector. We work on fresh water, coast, water for agriculture, hydropower, urban runoff, and so on. Here in this slide, you can see some of the policies in the water field that we have contributed with our scientific and science for policy support. For example, of interest for reservoirs and dams are, for example, the Flood Directive, but also the Water Framework Directive. So let's start with the main technical information. In particular, now I will show to you which are the main policies that could be of interest for dams and reservoirs. I will not focus on already well-known policies like, for example, Water Framework Directive or the Renewable Energy Directive that are well-known, but I will focus on the most recent one where also dams and reservoirs can have an important role. The first is the Water Resilience Strategy that has been published a few days ago. As you know, water and aquatic ecosystems are under severe pressure, not only in the European Union, but all over the world. And the water resilience strategies in the European Union, promoted by the European Commission, will aim at making Europe more water resilient, especially in light of climate changes, but also to foster the competitiveness of European companies in the water sector. And within this framework, which is general on water, also water storage will be a key topic. Water storage does not only mean to build new dams and new reservoirs, but also means to refurbish and to optimize better the dams that already exist, to also put into practice managed aquifer charge, groundwater charge, but also new dams and reservoirs. Here you can see the text that is also present in the document published by the European Water Resilience on the role of water storage and reservoirs. I will not read all because it will be too boring, but I have just highlighted some keywords. You can see some of the keywords are economic sectors because dams and reservoirs contribute to a lot of economic sectors, not only hydropower, but also agriculture, water supply, industrial water, flood protection, and so on. On the other hand, we know that there are environmental impacts when a dam is built, as any other energy technologies obviously interact with the environment, also providing impact. So we have benefit on one side, but also impact. So we need a careful planning and coordination, but also an integrated and sustainable water management strategy, also in light of the long-term climate changes that could occur. Another new about dams and reservoirs and also hydropower is this new European Union Horizon Research Project call. The title is Development of Hydropower Technologies and Water Management Schemes Allowing for Win-Win Situation of Flexible Hydropower and Biodiversity Improvement. Also here you can see the holistic and multi-purpose target. So on one hand we have energy generation flexibility, but on the other hand also biodiversity improvement. And also in this call is for hydropower. It's not specific for dams, but obviously we know that when we talk about hydropower, we also talk about dams and reservoirs. Another important news about water storage and reservoirs is the new European Union Knowledge Hub for Water that has been recently published. There is also a page for water reservoirs and large dams, where you can read some of the most updated information. There are also information statistics taken from the ICOLD database in an aggregated way. And you can also download from them some documents, some scientific publication of the JRC. JRC is the acronym of Joint Research Center on water reservoirs and dams. Another important recent policies related to hydropower, but they could also have impact on dams and reservoirs, because we know that dams and reservoirs are not only for hydropower. The Net Zero Industry Act, it aims at enhancing the European manufacturing capacity of net zero technologies in order also to strengthen and to support the competitiveness, also in this case, of European companies in the energy sector. And for hydropower, which is this is also very strategic, because if you look at the picture on the left, this picture represents the export of hydropower equipment. And as you can see, 42% of extra-European export of hydropower equipment are from European Union companies, so that are very competitive. But if we look at the picture on the right, we can see in the bars in yellow that this export capacity is decreasing over the year due to obviously competition of other countries. And so the scope of the Net Zero Industry Act is also to maintain this export capacity of hydropower equipment of European companies. That is also then related to hydropower, dams, and reservoirs. So now let's start to focus on dams and reservoirs in the European Union. I will focus on some technical details with reference also to European policies. I will discuss both the benefit of dams and reservoirs, but on the other hand, also the impact that could be generated in order to have an holistic approach and also to better strengthen their role in the water management sector. First of all, in this presentation, I will focus on the large artificial reservoirs that, according to ICOLD, are the one higher than 15 meters or below, but with a storage volume higher than 3 million cubic meters. As you know, hydropower and dams have a debate, at also highlighted in the previous slide, in the previous presentation, because on one hand, we have the large benefit. No other energy technology can provide the same benefit of dams and reservoirs and hydropower. But on the other hand, we have also impact. So we have to find a sort of balance, a sort of trade-off between the two. And this debate can also be perceived in European policies. European policies on dams and reservoirs and hydropower are very challenging. are very challenging because on one hand, they have to protect the environment, like, for example, the Water Framework Directive, where a dam could be a source of impact. On the other hand, we have other policies, like, for example, the Flood Directive or the Renewable Energy Directive, where dams and reservoirs are very important because they can foster the clean energy transition, but can also mitigate floods. So it's very challenging to manage these policies on dams and reservoirs. And so we need a lot of, we need an holistic approach, and also to collaborate with different stakeholders. Among the benefits of water reservoirs are the different uses they could satisfy, for example, irrigation, hydropower, water supply, flood control, navigation, and other uses, like, for example, firefighting, tourism, and so on. Here you can see a sketch, a summary of the use of water reservoir taken from the ICOLD register of dams. If we look at the first graph on the top, we can see on the left that in the European Union, more or less 70% of reservoirs are only with one use. The rest, 30%, are for multiple uses. But if we look at the stored volume on the right, we can see that the single-use reservoirs in blue store more or less the same volume of the multi-purpose reservoir. Obviously, because multi-purpose reservoirs, even if they are lower in numbers, they are larger. But we can see that the possibility to increase the multi-purpose of reservoirs is high, because, as already said, 70% of reservoirs are single-use. And so it's important to optimize them. If we look at the use, the picture on the bottom, we can see in blue on the left that more or less 46% of single-purpose reservoirs are for hydropower. So hydropower are a key component of single-use reservoirs. If we look, but obviously not all hydropower reservoirs are single-use. They can also provide, as I will show later, other uses, like, for example, flood control. If we look at the first use in multi-purpose reservoirs on the right, we can see that hydropower reservoirs and reservoirs for irrigation are the ones that are also host multi-purpose target. So one of the most important use, of water reservoirs is the energy storage, because the water that can be stored is also energy that is stored. Now, don't be afraid of this number. I will not go into this number, just to show you some example. You can find more information in the scientific paper that I published a few months ago. And what represents this number? The first line is the energy that is stored in pump storage hydropower. So practically the energy that we can generate in one discharging cycle. The second line is the energy stored in all the other hydropower reservoirs. Then there are different columns because there are different kinds of potential. So there is a theoretical potential, technical potential. But what is important in this slide is that you can see that there is one order of magnitude of difference between the energy stored in pump storage and the energy stored in generally hydropower reservoirs in general. And why this is important? Because pump storage hydropower, as already explained in the previous presentation, represent more or less 90% of the energy storage capacity. But if in this balance we also add the energy stored in all traditional hydropower reservoirs, we add an order of magnitude. So practically 99.99% of energy stored is stored in hydropower reservoirs. Hydropower reservoirs also provide additional benefits, like, for example, flood control and drought mitigation. It is not easy to quantify precisely the benefit, but, for example, it is possible to estimate that the multipurpose function of hydropower reservoirs can represent an additional annual economic value of between 10 to 20 billion euros, neglecting the importance role in mitigating floods. If we think that in the European Union in 2022, the damages from floods were 44 billion, we can see that the importance of dam in reducing also this economic loss is very important. On the other hand, hydropower reservoirs also can provide water during drought period. The International Hydropower Association estimates that through the water storage function of reservoirs, hydropower prevents more or less $100 billion in annual gross domestic product losses from drought incidents. So the multi-purpose function of hydropower in climate change mitigation is very important, but not only hydropower reservoirs, but all type of reservoirs. Obviously, these studies are is more common to find values and data for hydropower reservoirs that are more studied than other kind of reservoirs. But these apply obviously to all kind of dam and reservoirs. Then, on the other hand, we can also now analyze also the impact that can have dams and reservoirs, but try to examine the numbers in a quite, I would say, critical way. In the European Union, the European project Humber has identified more or less 400,000 barriers in European rivers. That is a lot. The large dams in the European Union are more or less 4,000, so 1%. If we count the number of hydropower plants, so including all hydropower plants, including those that do not use barriers, we have more or less 25,000 hydropower plants. So what we can say from these numbers, that obviously these numbers can have some approximation, but more or less the order of magnitude is that. For example, we identified 25,000 hydropower plants. Okay, they could be 20,000, 30,000, but they are not 100 or 100,000. Okay, so more or less the order of magnitude is that. We can see that they contribute to river fragmentation, but the large part of river fragmentation is not related to hydropower, but there are also other kind of barriers that contribute to it. In any case, it is very important to mitigate the impact of new hydropower and to develop it in a sustainable way. For example, using existing dams, using existing barriers instead of building new ones. So what is important also from this slide is that there is a huge potential, a huge presence of barriers and dams that instead of being, maybe they could be retrofitted and modernized instead of building new ones. Another impact of dams and reservoirs and barriers is sedimentation. The next presentation will focus on this, so I will not go into the detail. European Union reservoirs, more or less, are filled with sediment for an amount of 1% of the volume each year. So it is important to mitigate this and to remove sediments, but this cost. And we have estimated, so you have further details in the article, in the link below, between 2 to 8 billion euro per year of sediment management. Another issue related to dams, this instead is positive, is plastics. What does it mean this? Because dams and reservoirs trap sediments, which is an impact, but they also trap plastics that is in the rivers. And so they could also help in removing plastic from rivers. So with this slide, I don't want to say that we need to build dams to remove plastic, because the problem of plastics should be solved at the source. So plastic should not be thrown into the environment, should not be used, for example, should be recycled. But dams could also be used, for example, to remove the plastic that accumulate. Another important issue to discuss is the greenhouse gas emission from reservoirs, in particular from the decomposition of organic matter in the reservoirs. But in the European Union, this is not really a matter. In this picture, you can see the greenhouse gas emission, the methane emission from reservoirs in the world. In blue, you can see the point where this is very low. In red, where this is quite high. And we can see that in the European Union, most of dams are in blue, light blue. So their emission is not so relevant, except in some countries, like for example in Spain, in Italy, where maybe the climate is more hot, and so there could be more generation of this greenhouse gas emission. Another issue is evaporation, and we have also again to analyze this in a critical way. A lot of people complain that hydropower reservoirs or kind of reservoir generate evaporation, that is water loss. Yes, evaporation is a water loss, but evaporation is water that remain into the environment and contribute to the humidity of the atmosphere, so to create then a rainfall, maybe not in that place, in another place, but anyway, is water that recirculates in the environment. Furthermore, we should say that before that the dam was built, there was anyway evapotranspiration from the soil, from vegetation. So what really matters is not the total evaporation from the reservoir, but the evaporation minus the evapotranspiration that occurred before the reservoirs, so that the losses is less than the total evaporation. in order to reduce this evaporation and also to create electricity, to generate electricity, floating photovoltaics is another important option that could be built, especially now that is important, especially in the context of the clean energy transition. And there is an estimation of the JRC that using less than 50% of the European reservoirs, we can improve floating photovoltaic generation and generate more or less 50% of what hydropower from that reservoirs is generating. And if we cover 10% of this reservoir area, we can save a lot of water that could be then used also, for example, for hydropower generation if the reservoirs is for hydropower. But floating photovoltaics can be installed in any kind of reservoir. Obviously, in hydropower one is easier because there is already the infrastructure to generate electricity. Then we have, as I said, the benefit. On the other hand, we have also other, for example, impact, because dams reservoir, as already said, can generate a lot of impact, for example, on fish migration, hydropeaking, the impact of water temperature. But there exists some measures to mitigate this impact, like, for example, to release the environmental flow or to green the area upstream of the reservoir, or also the real-time control and operation of the reservoir. Or also there are other technologies under study, which for example, consider the aeration of the reservoir. So why it is important, the digitalization of reservoir, the digital twin of reservoir, so the real-time control? Because there is evidence that if we implement digital solution in water reservoirs, we can, if the reservoirs is for hydropower, for example, we can increase the efficiency up to 1%, but we can increase annual revenue and also annual energy generation by 10%. But we can also better forecast the inflows, so to better manage reservoir, to better manage the water resources. For example, in case of multi-purpose target of the reservoirs. Real-time control is also important for dam safety, but also for environmental monitoring. You can find more information also in this case in the paper at this link. So some conclusion, also open question at the European level. Hydropower and dams and all kinds of reservoirs are complex topic within the water, energy, food ecosystem and society nexus. Water reservoirs of all types come with benefit, but also with cost and impact. So there are some questions that need to be answered. First of all, how much water storage do we need? Which type of reservoirs and which type of storage should be built? Where the new reservoirs and the new storage is requested? Which are the innovative solutions that could be installed, that could be implemented to improve the better management of the existing reservoirs? Then how cost and also benefit should be allocated and shared among the different water uses? Because most of the time, a reservoir is built with impacts, but the impacts should be shared, should be attributed not only to the hydropower use of that reservoir, but to the all uses of that reservoir. And one other important topic not discussing here is what is the role of small reservoirs? Because small reservoirs are smaller, but are also more widespread on the territory. Very important document that we will release in the autumn is the update of the Clean Energy Technology Observatory, in particular the hydropower and pump storage one. Here you can see the 2024 report. Any comment, any feedback is very welcome to improve the next release. So thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Emanuele. It was, for me, it's always interesting to see or to get visualized again how complex the challenges are regarding the dams and the reservoirs we have, not just in Europe, but internationally, but here with the focus of Europe. And with that incoming, how complex also regulation and policymaking can be, and what are the focus points. So thank you very much to give the insight into, yeah, I would say your work and also the thing behind, I would say. Thank you very much.
Yeah, you're welcome.
I would like to lead to our last presentation for today. And now Dr. Hauer is presenting about the challenges regarding biodiversity. So if I may ask you to take over, share your screen, and the stage is yours.
Yeah, so welcome everybody and thanks for the invitation. Just give me a short feedback, please. Can you see my slides in the presentation mode?
Yes, we do.
Perfect, thank you. Yeah, so it was already announced that the title is about also good practices of the European hydropower industry. And here I want to present mainly the issues we're having with sediments and sediment management. It was already addressed in the previous talks that we have here, a big issue. And it was already stated at the Third Water Forum in Kyoto 2003 that the last century was the century of building dams and reservoirs, but the 21st century there will be the focus on the sediment management. So we have heard the numbers about 0.7% on an annual basis, desedimentation on the European perspective. In other parts of the world, it's much worse, and this all is an economic, technical, but also ecological issue. Just as an introduction, hydropower in Austria, but it's quite common in other parts where you have alpine mountains, that you have the reservoirs in the high head areas. Here you see the famous Carbon. It was one of the first in Austria. And in the larger catchments for the large rivers, we have the run-of-the-river power plants. So here for the Danube, it's represented with the Ips Persenbeug. What you can see in the graph is the increase in the installed capacity in Austria. And the red dashed line, the vertical one, is indicating these investments which have been made after the Second World War in the hydropower industry, and then this sharp and steep increase in the installed capacity. But since that time, so we have seen these are numbers, 1950s, 1960s, but since this time we also have not the electricity production, but also the issue with the sedimentation, which is in the high head regions, mainly belonging to torrents, but also from the sediments coming from the glaciers, which led to a kind of continuous fill-up of the reservoirs. But we also have this issue with the rivers and the impoundments in the river systems when we have the washout of soil, of agriculture land, as well as some regulated tributaries producing more sediments compared to natural status, and delivering this as well as the bad erosion downstream of dams, because you know, when we're trapping the sediments in the reservoirs, we have kind of starvation concept downstream, so meaning the incision is taking place, but also this incision material has to be deposited somewhere, and this is happening in the large impoundments of run-of-the-river power plants. And that this is an ongoing kind of natural process is underlined that we have this lift up of the Alps by 1.6 millimeter per year. So meaning that this kind of steeper slopes and continuously steeping up the mountains is meaning that we are producing sediments continuously. And we have the bad erosion in the rivers, like the Salzach with 7 centimeters per year. And we have the soil erosion rate, which is an average 3.4 tons per hectare per year in Austria. But when we look on different countries or different parts of Europe, we see that we have a high diversity according to this production of sediments out of the catchments. So in Albania, for example, we have 20 to 40 tons per hectare per year. So meaning totally different boundary conditions for the sediment management. And the same kind of difference, but in the other way. So in Norway, where we have much less sediment production, with 15 tons per square kilometer per year, we have to say, it's not hectare, per square kilometer per year in Norway. So also meaning that there are different boundary conditions, setting up reservoirs, keeping them running, etc., etc. This is also from ICOLD, but quite an old table. It was just a kind of prediction without any countermeasures when we would have 80% of the reservoirs filled up to 80%. And this was the prediction that in Asia, already this might occur very early. So 2035 was indicated in this publication. And in Europe, it was predicted for 2080, but including this high diversity, like I've shown from Albania to Norway, quite high diversity in the sediment production rate. So we also have costs according to this kind of mitigation works. It was just also highlighted before in one of the previous talks, but now some details on the costs we have in Austria, for example. When it comes to dredging, The companies at the moment have to pay about 20 to 30 euros per cubic meters. So dredging the material, transporting them and depositing them on special treatment areas. So meaning also as soon as you're taking out the sediments, by law it's waste. So it depends now done to the waste law, and meaning this deposition of sediments in special treatment areas is something which is run on a kind of frequent basis, also from the company perspective. So meaning it's a very high cost, remember, and you have seen all the pictures of the sediment deposits, what this means for individual companies. Then we have the flushing, which is also can see here on this picture, for the fine sediments quite inefficient to a high extent, because due to this cohesive sediments and the packing due to the water stage in the reservoirs, this is very dense, and only opening the bottom outlet is not very efficient. And then you need to have more time, more weeks with excavators for improving the situation, getting rid of the sediments like it was the initial idea. But meaning this stop of production costs up to millions of euros per flushing event, as you have to stop the production for a longer period over months to a certain extent. But then we have also ecological and economic importance. So some of the companies, they already have to pay about 100,000 euros in advance to get the permit that they are allowed to flush, right? So meaning before they can flush, they have to ask for a permit, and in this discussion of the permit, so also the fishing associations are involved, the downstream fishing associations, and they're also asking for compensation money already before the flushing event happened, and afterwards they have to pay once again for the damage what really happened. And then we have also the socioeconomic importance and also costs according to this, and you see here a graph. This is a kind of a reservoir fill-up of an impoundment. So it's an impoundment fill-up of a big Danube hydropower plant. So the Danube, you know, is the largest river we're having in Austria. And here we have also hydropower put in place. And this is from the hydropower plant Aschach. And you see it's almost coming to a kind of equilibrium stage. And then two flood events in 2002 and 2013 mobilized millions of cubic meters of fine sediments. And those were deposited on the floodplains downstream. So meaning, you cannot clearly see this, but on the second picture here on the left-hand side, there's a person standing. So meaning these deposits are about 3 meters thick. And these, so the hydropower companies were taken to court. So the people were blaming them for this kind of devastation of their garden and all this stuff, because when it becomes dry, this fine material, you can imagine this is very hard to remove it. It's more like concrete in a certain way. So all of these costs brought us to this kind of CD laboratory, which was established in 2017. This is the outcomes of the CD laboratory is one of the core topics I want to present today. So in 2017, we had the situation in Austria, and I think this was also quite common, a point of understanding in Europe, that we had a lack of basic information and technologies for reservoir management, that we had lack of process understanding, there was a missing adjustment of sediment management opportunities in reservoirs, there was an insufficient info of the interaction of sediment dynamics and aquatic ecology, and there were also no concepts for possible reuse of the deposited sediment. So these were the 5 pillars we had in our proposal, where we just handed in, and this was now this kind of concept of the CD laboratory we had until 2024. So it was a 7-year research program. And in module 1, which were really looking with the whole hydropower companies of Austria on these issues of sustainable sediment management. So module 2 was with the authority via Donau, responsible for maintaining the waterways at the Danube. So meaning also this kind of maintenance work is strongly related to sediment management. And in module 3, we had the turbine manufacturers Andritz and Voith, as you know, the kind of world-leading companies, and they have also issues with sediments when it comes to abrasion. And so they were also part of this CD laboratory. And now I just want to present some of the technical highlights, and then we're coming to these best practice examples, which are a kind of follow-up of the activities we did in this kind of basic research activities. So one point was this lack of data for sediment management, and here we tested and validated a new technology, or it was kind of old technology in gas and oil exploration, but kind of novel in sediment management for reservoirs. It's seismic profiling, so meaning sound-based detection of different layers of sediments. It was applied to standardize according to grain size distribution and the density of the layer depth, and also the kind of packing density. Here you see some results. We did this in collaboration with a company from Styria. So they're working in this kind of oil and gas exploration business. And here you see some of the resulting maps. In one of the reservoirs from Verbund company, it was the case study Rotau. And we used also this information for further studies in the lab according to the initiation of motions, for meaning the erosion, remobilization, and consolidation of the sediments, because it's very important that we also have an improvement in predictive tools. Because when you look on these empirical formulas about the initiation of motion, so the critical shear stress or the critical discharge, you see in common, according to these approaches, the smaller the grain size, the less force is needed that sediments are mobilized. But we know also from different publications that with cohesive sediments, this looks different. And we cannot apply these formulas, for example, like it's presented here, for predictions in a reservoir flushing efficiency at the current status, right? So these formulas would lead to different results, or different and wrong results, as I have discussed before about this efficiency and the picture of flushing. So we had these laboratory studies, and now you can see here some of the outcomes, that you see this kind of increase in bottom shear stress for the sediment movement for 3 different criteria: for the initial motion, for mass erosion, and total erosion. So we had a novel test rig. For those who are interested, I can send you papers on this. I have not put too much information according to this setup due to time constraints here for this talk. But anyway, so now we did this kind of improvement, which is very much needed for having a prediction of the efficiency of channel flushing or other measures. So this was very much needed based on basic research. But now we're coming to this issue of ecology and these aspects of best practices. So we also had this kind of shortcoming that for reservoir flushings, it was that we had no information what kind of amount, so meaning the duration and the suspended sediment concentration can be handled by fish. So the suspended sediment concentration and the duration, these are the 2 kind of parameters found on this graph here. And it was only Newcomb and Janssen from 1996 who provided a review of North American fish species. So it was Arctic grayling, it was rainbow trout, mainly studied. But in Austria, in general in Europe, we had no information about what it means, what is the stress level, where you have some fatal kind of impacts due to kind of sediment concentrations and durations on native fish species. So this aspect of the native fish species was missing. And in Austria, it was just common that for reservoir flushings, you only allow 1 gram per liter as a constant load of fine sediment concentration. So this was in all permits we had over the last years in Austria, that the governmental institution said, yeah, you have your technical thing to do with your reservoir. Is it for maintenance work? Is it to get rid of the fine sediments? But you all have to keep this kind of 1 gram per liter. You're not allowed in the long-term range to be above this threshold. In the short-term range, it was allowed for 1 hour going up to 10 gram per liter, but also very restrictive according to this kind of concentrations. And then we did an ACD laboratory studies in the field. So we investigated also how such sediment management activities of hydropower companies are just can be detected and how they are developing in the downstream part of the river system. So usually you have one suspended sediment probe installed somewhere close to the very release the fine sediments, but we have no information how this develops downstream. And we investigated the in-river over 100 kilometers, and we could show this kind of natural retention of fine sediments due to deposition on the one hand side, but also kind of dilution effect due to incoming tributaries. So meaning the conclusion out of the field studies was that when you measure the fine sediment concentration immediately outlet of the reservoir, it doesn't mean that you're impacting the whole river stretch with the same concentration like you're measuring at the outlet, right? So it's similar to hydropeaking studies and hydropeaking impact assessments we did in the past, that you have a kind of certain longitudinal kind of impact in a positive way that due to deposits, but also due to dilution effects of tributaries, this kind of fine sediment concentration is reduced. And then we did also some measurement in detail in some habitats where we could also detect this kind of three-dimensional variability in suspended sediment concentration. It's not that you have one concentration for the whole cross-section in the same range, but you have habitat-specific variability, and also the fish are able to move towards this, right? So they're actively moving towards sheltered habitats, to kind of refugial habitats, to get shelter against higher concentrations, which also occur, for sure, during flood events. So we also had this kind. So we had in the CD laboratory this kind of field assessment, and then coming to the numerics, which I explain a little bit later. So the overall aim was that we had to look, or we wanted to look to getting the rivers fit for more sediments, because up to now we had this kind of two-class society. So the positive side was always the gravel, and yeah, everyone wants to have gravel bars. And the negative one was, you can see in the picture below, this kind of fine sediment deposits. But both pictures were taken, for example, from the Vios in Albania, and both pictures you can also find at the Alpenrheingelwälze. They're together. Also, the fine sediments have a certain role in the ecosystem, so they're responsible for keeping the moisture that plants can grow on the gravel bars. If this would just a naked gravel bar without any fine sediments, there would not be any establishment of a long-term vegetation, especially not coming when you go into Albania, but also due to climate change and the temperature increasing. So meaning keeping the moisture is an issue also for the vegetation. And then also you have to stress this and to discuss this. When you look on the old maps, and probably all of you have seen this kind of historical maps from alpine rivers, and where from a restoration perspective, it was often referred, we have to go to this reference status. But these kind of maps, and you've seen with these islands in the rivers, so these kind of braiding situations, like here in the Vios in Albania, they have not mapped the composition of coarse and fine sediments. It was just an assumption. For sure, these were gravel bars, but there was not a kind of indication found in these historical maps about the content of fine sediments. And depending on the geology, for sure, you have a variability, but fine sediment is part of the natural ecosystem. And this was the idea to getting the aim, rivers getting more fit for more sediment. And now coming to this kind of best practices in detail. And here we did some experiments in our new hydraulic lab in Vienna. Some of you may heard of this new facility. We can run up to 10 cubic meters per second as experimental discharge. The higher the selected model scale, the lower the risk of unavoidable errors. So this was the idea behind this establishment of the lab, especially for sediment transport, coarser sediment transport, to get rid of this scaling errors due to variability in turbulences, etc., etc. But we are also doing experiments with fish and the fine sediment concentrations for native fish species. We have brown trout, we have grayling, we have bullhead. So very typical fish species for alpine river systems, influenced by reservoirs and hydropower production. And this is one of the best practices that we say we want to improve the scientific standards. And we're now running the video, and I'm not sure. It's quite loud. I have to lower the, yeah, sorry, it was quite loud. This is an experiment with 1 gram per liter in our test rig, and you've seen the brown trout. And also in this laboratory testing, they're moving towards the walls of the flume, right? So this kind of behavior of looking for shelter is also visible in the test rig, but they cannot escape, as you can see. So meaning that we have a control over the duration impact on the fish and also the duration, the concentration impact on the fish. So these are the picture of how these facilities look like. We call them the sediment impact assessment flumes, and these are already first results, where you can see on the x-axis the duration, and on the y-axis the suspended sediment concentration, and in green where the mortality rate was 0, and where we had some mortality in the experiment, but very low, so meaning 20%. This was 1 fish out of 5, because we always test a group of 5 fish species in the fish species, 5 fish in the test rig. Then we also did some studies in the field according to sediment management and small hydropower plants. For sure, this is not this kind of topic of reservoirs and dams. Usually ICOLD is dealing with, but we see the whole hydropower, whole hydropower range in our Austria, also for the impact assessment that is very much needed. Also give information about the small hydropower plants, and we could see when you have this establishment of an equilibrium from a river morphological perspective, so meaning due to the deposits in the small reservoirs here, and the sediment continuity is working, because you see this kind of gates here, and due to this operation you can also allow this sediment flow downstream. So meaning we have both advantages. Sediment continuum is established for the downstream reaches, but also the characteristics of the reservoir do not look anymore like a reservoir, but it's more like a river. Then we have here the very good ecological status or good ecological status for macroinvertebrates. So this is done, this assessment by our colleagues from the Hydrobiology Institute, so meaning for the smaller ones, there's opportunity. It's not necessary that you just excavate always this kind of impoundment sections. It's not needed from the perspective of hydropower production. It's run of the river. There's only the need that the water is coming towards the turbine. How this kind of reservoir looks like is more or less not that important, with the exception if it's part of the concept of flood protection, that you need to establish a certain cross-section in these so-called impoundments. Then you need to be aware and take care that this cross-section bathymetry has to be in a certain stage. Otherwise, these natural processes and developing these natural processes is beneficial for the smaller ones. Also for the smaller ones, we have seen that spawning is possible quite close to the hydropower facilities at the intake channels, but also downstream when the boundary conditions enable the deposition of certain grain sizes, and then the flow velocities in addition just enable this kind of formation of spawning sites, which then are used for grading, and also brown trout. And then we just developed this kind of numerical tools. I was referring to them before. So for this impact assessment of reservoir flushings, we developed the model SEDFISH. It's a 3-dimensional suspended sediment transport model, but with this information of our laboratory experiments you have seen in the video, with this new information of brown trout, grayling, but also bullhead, we can combine these model results and the impact assessment of the flume experiments and give a good prediction, and according to certain scenarios of fine sediment release from a reservoir or from other activities where fine sediment production is increased. And then we have also the HEM impoundment. So this is a module for macroinvertebrates. So here you can see this outcomes for this reservoir I presented before, for the reservoir, this impoundment I presented before at the Schwarze River. In green, where also the model predicts the good ecological status according to macroinvertebrates, and this is quite good validated with what we could measure based on the biological sampling in this stretch. So meaning the best practices have to be seen in an integrative approach. So on the one hand side, from a technical perspective, to increase the knowledge and also the capacities in the monitoring measuring part, and from this you have an improved process understanding, like I showed, with these improved formulas for the prediction of the fine sediment erosion. And then you come up to numerical modeling tools. But on the same side, or in the same way, you have on the ecological part this improvement of the monitoring and measuring technologies, increasing the process understanding, and then coming to these numerical prediction tools, which are also beneficial in the whole perspective, in the whole scope of a sustainable sediment management. And then the last point is the possible reuse we have not addressed so far, but this is also what we're working on, where we look on the deposits, on the composition. And for example, in some parts of Austria, in the granitic gneiss region, we have a lot of quartzite sand, and this was historically used always for the Bohemian glass production, but now you need to have a certain special treatment. For sure, it's now cheaper to buy still this kind of quartzite sand, but maybe we find also some solutions here in a kind of recirculating economy way, also with the agriculture industry, when you just have cleaned this with all the organic stuff, and probably the organics can be used for producing terra preta. So there are a lot of things ongoing about the potential reuse of these sediments also in Austria, and new research projects are directly focusing on this. But this is also something which would be a kind of best practice when you would reuse this kind of dredged material. So the challenges for the sustainable sediment management is for sure when this kind of concept of reservoirs, the idea of such reservoirs that you use the amount of water coming from the catchment on an annual basis, on a monthly basis, on a daily basis, but it's used for operating in the reservoirs, right? So this is the idea of this kind of dams. But when you put them into large river systems, where you have several thousands of square kilometers in a catchment, that you cannot handle all the water anymore to capturing the high flows, but you have a frequent overspill of flood events. And we have seen this nicely in the picture before, where all of this plastic was captured at the Three Gorges Dam. You can also assume that fine sediments are transported through the entire reservoir and deposited somewhere at the bottom outlet, causing troubles with the intakes to the turbines, etc., etc. So these frequent overspill of flood events are causing this kind of transportation, not only of sediments, but also of plastic through the reservoir, even if it's a very big one. But here we have challenges we have to solve, because these are causing technical and also economical problems. So last point, going back to the very small ones, the removal of the obsolete barriers. So this is now frequently discussed according to the free-flowing initiative for the European Union, and also Austria is now working on a map showing which of these kind of old barriers, obsolete barriers, can be taken away. But we have to be somehow critical with this, and not because we have seen in some of the laboratory experiments that due to this release of this sediment plume here, we have the process of advection and dispersal. So it means this is not just flushed out with the first somehow flood event, this kind of sediment deposits, but it's more creeping on the surface over a longer period. And when these sediments are somehow polluted, or we have high organic loads, this might be harmful for the ecology downstream. And we have such a case where this is one of the old stone weirs in Austria, which is discussed for being removed. But also in the same time, we have about 30 meters downstream, the last remaining freshwater pearl mussel population in the Große Mühl River. And we know we can predict this when you would just take away this old weir here, that this kind of freshwater pearl mussel population would probably not survive, because this kind of sediments deposited over hundreds of years, we have to say, this is a very old stone weir, this would cover them over a longer period, so not being transported over the mussels, which also is harmful, but they would be buried. So they would be buried over 1, 2, 3 years, and this would be too much to survive. So meaning this also is an issue for the small hydropower companies and the small hydropower association, we have to say, to discuss this, and also from an ecological point of view, but not so for the larger ones. So coming summary and conclusion. So also in the first talk, this kind of aspects of a backbone were addressed. So we have to say that sediments are the backbone for the river morphology and the habitat. So first priority that we look sediments for the rivers, what are needed, that you have no incision. But then when you have too much sediments, what you're doing with them, right? They're depositing on special treatment areas, very costly. So a recirculating economy approach would be something which should be in future targeted. But in principle, sustainable hydropower must include sediment management. So this is now listed here in the first line. And so there are many evidences, the whole community of hydropower, and also from the ecological point of view, that the sediment dynamics and the processes are very important for river basin management as a total. Then technical and economical optimization is possible and should be targeted. So not only we have developed a lot of things, so all the other institutions, there are a lot of innovation ongoing in the hydropower research community. They have to be put in place, and therefore to avoid the old-fashioned concepts in the planning phases, to implement the new ones, that we have the predictive tools, the models, that we can optimize this kind of sediment management procedures from a technical perspective, but also from an ecological one. And this must be incorporated in environmental impact assessments in general, but also in the operational scheme. But as a researcher, always to have this argument at the end, there's still a strong need for basic and applied research and for scientific collaboration to move on, right? So we have seen the challenges of climate change. There are probably some process changes due to climate change we have not on our radar so far, but we should be able to address them when there's the time that they're showing up. So meaning this kind of constant activities in research according to the climate change scenarios, I think is very important and very much needed. So with this, say thank you for attention, and yeah, if you have questions, please.
Thank you very much. I really liked your presentation because I have to say I'm a sedimentation nerd. So that's my daily business. I'm trying to convince people that sustainable sediment management is a must-have for all the reservoirs. So I will absolutely get back on to your presentation, and I for sure will re-watch it later on. I found it very interesting that you just conducted more studies about the fish and the impact from the sediment inside the river, because the research we have publicly available is kind of, it's just a few research being conducted in the past, and it's also like from the early 2000s. So thank you very much for conducting research in that field, and also to share your insights on that.
Thank you.
I want to thank the invited speakers so far. As we are a little bit late in time, I will just say we will have a short presentation of the YPF work, and afterward the Q&A session. And I would say we will be done in around 20 to 30 minutes at latest. I hope it's fine for you. So I would ask Mattea to give a wrap up about our young professionals' work.
Thank you, Lara. Yes, good morning, good afternoon, good evening to everyone. I promise my brief will be very, very fast. Just as it is customary, we use these webinars also to expand our network. So I will just quickly tell something about our activities and how to get involved. So we are ICOLD Young Professionals, and our aim is that we are focusing on supporting early career professionals in the Dam and Reservoir section. So we are targeting young people under the age of 40 who are at the start of their career, and we are aiming to create opportunities for mentorship, networking, and knowledge transfer, like this webinar today. So our aim is to inspire young professionals to be actively involved, to participate within their national committees, to participate in research, and to highlight also the important contributions of the young professionals within technical and strategic ICOLD activities. Our board consists of 7 members. All of us are voted in. All of us are younger than 40 years of age, and all of us are nominated by the national committees. The elections take place during the annual meetings of ICOLD. The last one was just a few weeks ago. And to ensure continuity, typically 2 positions open for elections next year. So in the next year, the meeting will be in Guadalajara. Again, 2 positions will open, and the call to receive nominations will be open 2 weeks before the actual meeting. We also serve as an umbrella for the national forums. So until now, 33 national committees have established a forum, and in the beginning of this webinar, you heard that there is 101 ICOLD countries. So we are supporting formation of new forums. If you are here present at the webinar, need some support on this task, contact us later on and we will do our best to help you. Some practical information. To stay informed about our work, the opportunities, we invite you to visit our webpage for our LinkedIn group and to subscribe to our YouTube channel. And all the past webinars, including this one, are recorded and published on the YouTube. So if you missed any of the sessions, if you want to revisit the topic, we encourage you to explore the library of past webinars on our YouTube channel. And another collaboration with the Technical Committee on Capacity Building. Here is a QR code. They ask us if we can help them to conduct a survey. So if you have a few minutes of your time, also scan this code, and this will help for future work of the Technical Committee on Capacity Buildings and on development on our common initiatives. And the last slide, I would just like to conclude that we will continue with our mission, which is promoting knowledge exchange, professional development. We are currently planning new webinars, and we are currently planning the full program for the next ICOLD annual event. Here are some photos from the event a few weeks ago. We are aiming for the similar format, which is the YPF awards, workshops, our meeting, network activities, mentoring lunches, and we are also always open to receive new initiatives. So if you wish to get engaged, if you wish to be activated within ICOLD YPF, we are happy to hear from you. And with this, I will conclude my short summary. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Mattea. So I really want to encourage you, young professionals, be part of it. It's fun. I would summarize it as this. It's fun to have a great network. It's fun to be involved into the organization of the ICOLD events from the young professionals. And it's also fun to be present on the event. So I'm really looking forward to see you next year in Guadalajara, Mexico. Okay, so I would now lead to the Q&A session. And I already saw we have questions in the chat. So I would say I start with the first one. It goes to Emanuele. You already saw that in the chat, I've seen. So Sylvie, who was it? It's from
me.
Mattea. So please, Mattea, ask your question.
Okay, I'll ask my question. Emanuele, from your perspective, what are the gaps or improvements needed in the EU policies to better support sustainable reservoir management in the future? I would like to hear your insight on that.
Thank you for the question. I think that one important improvement that could be done, but it also represents a challenge, is the data sharing. Because in order to improve the policies around reservoirs, because there are not policies specific on dams, there are policies on water resilience, on energy directive, water framework directive, where also reservoirs are in. It is important to have real data. For example, how reservoirs are managed by the operator. But these data are difficult for the operator to be shared because they are very confidential data, sometimes cannot be shared. For example, now we have a hydrological model working at the European scale, is the Liza flood model, where we also simulate reservoirs. And with this model, we support the policy development by developing some scenarios, assessment, and so on. But sometimes we don't have data in order to validate how the reservoir in our model work in comparison with the real reservoirs. And the operators sometimes, or not sometimes, but always, don't want to share their data on the reservoirs in order to compare how our model works with them. And this is a challenge because obviously we understand the fact that they don't want to share their data. But on the other hand, this data could be very useful to improve our assessment, to improve the policy. So this is a possible improvement, also a challenge on the other hand.
Thank you so much. Matteo, just a short question. Can we enable the participants also to be present? Like maybe to give them the access to open the camera and the microphone if they like to?
If they raise their hand, I think I'm able to enable their mic and camera, yes.
Okay, perfect. So we have a raised hand over there. Nazer Faisi, I will just, I can do it too. I will enable your camera and your microphone. Now you should be able to, yes, perfect. You are still on mute. Wait a second. Oops. Yes. Click again. We cannot hear you right now. Yes, now.
Now you're hearing me?
Perfect.
Yeah. Good afternoon, all of you. Yes,
Hi.
you hear me?
Yes, we hear you.
Yeah, I'm Nasir Ahmad Faizi from Afghanistan. At the moment, I'm working in a hydropower project in Afghanistan, in one of big project in Afghanistan. I have the question regarding the sedimentation. In Afghanistan, we have the one reservoir, big dam in Kajaki hydropower project is since 1977 is operation. Since 2011, we are not have, unfortunately, due to the situation of Afghanistan, we are not have any exact data of sedimentation. In my question is from the expert in this regard, what should we do? How we should know in how much percentage of the sedimentation existed? Because before since 1973 was the capacity of reservoir around 1.7 billions. In 2011, when the U.S. Army Corps estimated it's near to 1 billion. Since 2011, we are not have any exact data in any investigation.
Yeah, may I answer? So thanks for the question. So it means that you have to do a bathymetric survey. This can be done with ADCP, for example. This is a device. It's not too big to transport, and with this you make cross sections, and also in the longitudinal way you make a kind of longitudinal profile. And based on these cross sections and the longitudinal profiles, you get an information about the stage of your sedimentation in the reservoir, and then you can calculate the remaining volume you can use for operation. And you will also see and that you have probably issues with the bottom outlet, so this might be covered with sediments, and also maybe some other technical facilities there. But then you have to do a more exact survey around these places where you know that there might be some troubles with this kind of technical high valuable facilities. But in general, a bathymetric survey is very much needed in your case. Yeah.
Thank you so much. Liza, I also see a raised hand from you. To whom is your question going?
Hi, it was just a comment on Emanuele's answer to the previous question. Just to help with the data sharing, I wanted to share with you the fact that in ICOLD we are moving to make public the World Register of Dams. I saw that Emanuele has already used such information, but we are also working to geo-reference the dams and also to add information about the reservoirs. Just this is some good news that will help with such research and such use and evaluation of the reservoir's impact.
Yeah, thank you very much. Thank you. For example, one additional information that, for example, will be very useful for our model to improve the assessment is how the reservoir, not only the design capacity of the reservoir, the height of the dam, but how the reservoirs is managed, for example, during a flood, during drought, in case of multi-purpose operation, how water is allocated.
I understand. Okay, this is an information that is very difficult to incorporate in a database, even in georeferenced geodatabase. But okay, we are starting to move towards this direction. And I understand what you're saying about some reservoir operators cannot really give out this information.
Yeah. Thank you.
I also see a raised hand from Javad. So I will enable your microphone and also your camera. And now you could be able to unmute your mic. Hi.
Can everybody hear me?
Yes, we do.
Good day, everyone, and thank you for sharing your valuable information. I got a question from Mr. Quaranta, and before asking the question, I want to thank him for his great presentation. My question is that, as you said, Mr. Quaranta, Europe is planning to develop new dams in order to meet the demand management expectation. My question is, were there some criteria that were not foreseen before that led to Europe to develop these new dams, or were there some misguidance during the execution of the dams that led challenges to appear in Europe?
Yeah, thank you for the question. I would like to specify that maybe I will rephrase better. I say that not that the European Union is planning new dams, but that the European Union has understood that there is a need of water storage. So obviously to make water more available, also because there will be in some region more hydrological variability that will not be aligned with the demand, water storage will be essential. This water storage can be realized in different ways. Could be manage aquifer recharge, groundwater recharge, nature-based solution, and also the optimization or also new dams where they are needed. When a new dam is built, obviously there are some criteria to be followed. For example, now there is the do not significant harm principle, but also all the taxonomy regulation that say how, in particular for hydropower, more than dam, how a certain investment could be classified sustainable or not. Or for example, also for new dams and reservoir, there are some directives that should be checked. For example, the Environmental Impact Assessment Directive, the Water Framework Directive. There should not be a deterioration of the ecological status of the river, otherwise compensation measures should be implemented. So there are already several policies and regulations from the environmental perspective that should be followed. And then each member state, each country has its own national legislation to be followed. Your microphone.
Yeah, I saw that. Thank you. Thank you so much. Do we have any other questions?
Can I ask another one question?
Yes.
Yes, you may.
Excuse me. Are these criteria are driven from the climate change status now that the climate change effects are now can be touched more than ever?
Yeah, for example, in the design of new reservoirs, but also new hydropower plants, for example, climate change scenario should be considered because, for example, the design guideline used for design hydropower plants are based maybe on historical hydrological time series that in the future will not be valid. And so they should be considered climate change in the future.
And about considering climate change, are there any codes or resolutions for in international scale to be considered during designing dams?
But I can answer this from our point of view. For example, we have this hydrological model, Liza flood, where we can run different scenarios of water resource management, runoff, and so on, where we also can consider the different climate change scenarios. So already in development of the policies, we perform some assessment on water resources, considering different scenarios and showing the range of solution of results.
I see. Yes. Thank you for your time and for your patience. Thank you.
You're welcome.
If there, oh, yeah.
May I add something on that? On the international scale, ICOLD is trying to set, as I mentioned in my presentation, guidelines and best practices, which are, of course, not binding documents to any of the members of the national committees or to any organization. However, this consulted, and I would like to mention that just last month in Chengdu, the General Assembly approved one new document that has to do exactly with the environmental assessment and impact of dams, and a lot of those issues are handled and discussed in this document. It is not yet available to the public, but it will be soon.
Can I ask the name of this this declaration?
I will put it in. I will put it in the chat. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
So I would also have one question. Dr. Hauer, I'm interested. You presented the set fish tool, but as far as I understood, it's like focusing on flushing events and the regulation on flushing. Do you think it's also possible to develop it further for other sedimentation management strategies?
Yes, so thanks for the question. I would say it can be further developed for any active sediment management measures. So meaning when you're just dumping fine sediments due to excavation somewhere, or you have also in some of the rivers, we had the issue with torrents delivering a lot of fine sediments towards the river, and then to get a kind of impact assessment, what will happen if these fine sediments are just taken by higher flows from the river. So meaning, yeah, this kind of all active increases in fine sediments can be modeled with the set fish tool.
Nice. I'm really interested in that, and I think I will get on that later on. Thank you.
Yeah, welcome.
Matea, your hand is also raised. I would say you would be the last one.
Okay, thank you. I have a question for Dr. Hauer. You were mentioning the removal of obsolete dams, and you're mentioning the ecological research in the project of dam removal. Is this something mandatory that you have to do for any dam removal project, so that you first have to have an ecological assessment if from the ecological perspective, even dam removal is feasible, and if it's not, then it's not done? Or was this just one case you mentioned?
No, it's for the large dams, it is mandatory that you have to look on the deposited sediments. And when you have more than 10% of organic deposits in these reservoirs, that you have to look on chemical aspects or anything of pollutants, right? So when you have more than 10%, it's mandatory for the large dams. So this comes from these dam removal parts from the Western United States. But for the small ones, no one is taking care up to now. It's just when this assumption when you remove the small weirs that you have an ecological benefit anyway. So this is this kind of Also in Austria, we have, from the ministry perspective, this kind of approach. But we are a little bit critical about this, as you have heard, and we know that these deposits of sediments, and they might be polluted, yes or no, or it should be investigated what is happening when you just remove this obsolete barrier, like it's called. So it's this is an ongoing process. We are negotiating in Austria, so there are no standards according to this.
Nice. Thank you very much. A big thanks goes to all our speakers. Thank you for your time and for your presentations. And also thank you for the great participation in the discussion. I think that's a very, very valuable exchange we're having here. I hope to see you again. I hope to see you also in person on one of the physical events that are planned, maybe in Europe, maybe in the ICOLD context. So I wish you all a good day. I want to let you know, or repeat a second time, we will upload the webinar on our YouTube channel. It will be available in the future. And this goes to our speakers. If you have any wishes to some parts which might not be going on public soon or by us, let us know and we will edit it the way. So I wish you all a great day. Thanks for being here, spending the time with us, and hope to see you the next time. Goodbye.
Thank you.
Thank you for the invitation. Bye.
Goodbye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you very
Bye.
much.
Thank you.